What is happening, family and friends? Welcome to the Arington Gavin Show. This is the program where we discuss trending news and thought-provoking topics from the fields of politics, sports, pop culture, and all of the above. Man, I'm so excited to bring to you this awesome episode. Why? Because I have two of my good buddies from opposite sides of the aisles, but guess what? It's not foreign for us because at the end of the day, we respect others' opinions, and it's all about again having the conversation. I tell people all the time, especially on this program, conversation is what this world needs. It's very easy too. It's pretty cheap. The last time I checked, I don't think you can pay for a conversation. Well, depending on which field you're in, you do have to pay. But anyway, it's just a simple conversation. We can take care of almost majority of the world's issues by just having a sit down convo and allowing the other person to to share their perspective or give their insight and, vice versa. So very excited on today's show. We're going to have a panel, no strangers to the program, Mr. Conrad Shez Venter. He is the host of Shez Who, the also popular YouTube show. I've been on there. He's been on this program a few times. So excited to have my good buddy, Mr. Conrad Shez Venter back on. And then we also have new to the program, Mr. Christian Hines. Mr. Christian Hines, he's the co-host of the Making the Argument podcast with Nick Francis. Very popular podcast. If you haven't checked it out, be sure to. I believe it's on Rumble, YouTube, all digital and streaming platforms. So we're gonna just have a great conversation, guys, about once again the election cycle. Come on. I mean, I was gonna bring it up. I talk about it majority here on the program, but so much stuff has occurred. I was just talking with the fellas before we started this, man. I mean, this is like a NASCAR race, right? You see it, just it's just a simple like going in circles. Wait, either the lead changes, or a crash might happen, or so many turn of events can occur within a NASCAR race, and that's really odd coming from me because I probably watched maybe two NASCAR races, not even the whole thing. So I'm just like, look at me using NASCAR analogies in a sense. I'm growing. So it's which is interesting, guys. So much has happened with this 2024, this presidential election cycle. We've had a very sad time in our history of an assassination attempt against former President Donald Trump. We've had before that, we had the majority of or a lot of Democrats actually asking for the current nominee to drop out because they saw a cognitive, and really to most people, but to them especially, they saw a cognitive what's the word I'm looking for, decline of current President Joe Biden. And it's a lot, man. It's a lot happening, and I'm just excited to get the perspective from two guys I consider experts in the political field. And we're just gonna, we're gonna impact it all today on the Arington Gavin Show. Again, for those who are listening and tune in regularly, I thank you so much. Continue to support. Follow us on all social media platforms, especially our Instagram page at the Arington Gavin Show. New episodes drop at least four times a week on digital and all podcast platforms. But we can also tune into this program Monday through Fridays at 11 p.m. on WDJY 99.1 FM Straight Talk out of the Metro Atlanta area, as well as WDJYFM.com. So multiple ways you can tune into the program. Follow us on our YouTube channel, R Smooth Club Media, the letter R and then Smooth Club Media, as well as on our Rumble channel, the Arington Gavin Show. We're slowly but surely growing those followers as well. So much stuff. We continue to grow, and we continue to hold on. Let me correct this real quick. Freitas. I said I've mispronounced the last name of actually a state delegate. I think he's a current state delegate out in Virginia. Nick Freitas, excuse me. And so what else do we have going on? Before I get going, I always got to acknowledge our proud sponsors like Ingenious Gin. Ingenious Gin is a Black-owned, veteran-owned spirit for all you gin connoisseurs out there. I highly recommend Ingenious Gin. It's a rose gold. It's pretty smooth. And look, coming from a bourbon and whiskey guy, that's saying a lot when it comes to, hey, I'm referring you to a gin that I highly recommend that you'll enjoy. You can have it neat. You can have it on ice. It's a great cocktail mixer as well. Created by veterans. Shout out to my good friends Reggie and Lawrence. be sure to grab yourself a bottle, any one of your local spirit stores or ABC stores, as well as you can go online to ingeniousin.com and do me a favor, please drink responsibly. All right. That's enough for the intro. What I'm going to do right now, guys, we're going to do a quick commercial break. When we come back, I'm going to bring on my panelist, Mr. Conrad Shezventer, host of Shez Who, as well as Mr. Christian Hines, co-host of Making the Argument podcast with Nick Freitas. All right. Don't go anywhere, my friends. When we come back, we'll have more here on the Arington Gavin Show.
Become a man of distinction with Rugged Evolution Beard Care. Order our scented beard oils and beard balms to help you maintain and grow the perfect beard. Order today. Try our men's care products like the full body exfoliating cleansing bars, body wash, smooth stash, and more. Log on to our website or download our app to place your orders. Rugged Evolution Beard Care. We're your luxury but affordable men's care line. And remember,
rugged is the new smooth.
All right, y'all. Welcome back to the Arington Gavin Show. As I mentioned before, I have a great panelist of political experts here with me. First up, we new to the program, Mr. Christian Hines. Christian is the co-host again of Making the Argument podcast with Nick Freitas. Christian, how you doing, my friend?
Doing well. How about you?
Doing great, doing great. And next up, no stranger to the program, Mr. Conrad Shezventer, host of Shez Who. You can check it out on YouTube right now as we speak. Matter of fact, go subscribe to Shez Who right now. Conrad, how you doing, sir? Oh, Conrad, I think you're mute. Your mic's mute.
Very hot. That's
there
right.
We go. What is going on, boss man? How you doing?
Pretty good. It's about to relax and enjoy some nice political commentary, and it's always great to be on this show.
Awesome, man. Awesome. Well, fellas, let's get into it. This 2024 election, I honestly thought the last election cycle was very interesting with so many, just back and forth and like who do you think is going to win right at this point? But this one is like, I'll just, in the words of Mr. Ron Simmons, you see him right behind here as an avid wrestling fan, his key word was damn. Like that's literally what I'm feeling right now. So let's start it off, guys, and whoever would like to chime in first, honestly, in this one, what is the mindset going for voters right now? What do you think is, just putting yourself outside of the political spectrum, but as a voter, what's going in your mind with this election cycle?
I don't know if I should say mass interest, because I think we're all going to get a lot more interested very quickly. I mean, you have an event like over this past weekend, everyone is going to start really zooming in pretty quick. When I'd be watching some shows across the channels, they might say something like, voters don't really tune in until September anyway in an election year. And I never wanted to believe something like that, because I happen to be someone that likes to follow politics daily. Mm-hmm. So in that instance, with both with Biden's debate performance and this assassination attempt over the weekend, no one is no longer paying attention.
What about you, Christian?
You got to consider that we're dealing with an unprecedented election cycle, right? It hasn't been since Grover Cleveland that somebody has tried to stage a presidential comeback on this level. If Trump wins in November, he will be only the second person in history to win 2 inconsecutive terms. And so what that means is that the name ID is already sky high for both of these candidates. Everybody knows who Donald Trump is, and it's not September yet. Everybody knows who Joe Biden is because he's the incumbent president. So this isn't like one of these election cycles where the average voter is thinking like, well, who's running again? Like at this point, everybody knows who's running, right? And so and we're only in early mid-July. So I think that it's really hard for us to pin down what is happening when we look at previous elections as a comparison or a guide. I don't, in some ways, I feel like that you can't really use 2016 or 2020 or 2012 or really any of the recent election cycles for the last like 20 or 30 years. I don't really think you can use any of them to really pinpoint where we're at right now. In some ways, we're kind of in uncharted waters.
I totally agree with that, Christian, because I start to, go back way back when, okay, who was the first known Republican to make their bid into the presidential race? That was Nikki Haley. And then you added on, I think, was Tim Scott after, maybe?
Yeah.
And then Chris Christie. We've had former VP Mike Pence, who's kind of a little later on. Doug Burgum was an unknown voice, in my opinion. No one really knew.
Ramaswamy.
Vivek, yes. I think Vivek might have been either second or third behind Nikki Haley at the time to make the announcement, and then you move on to the Democratic side. You had the gentleman congressman out of Minnesota, Dean Phillips, and then you had Marianne Williamson, come back running for office as well. RFK at the time was running as a Democrat, but obviously a little too controversial for the left side, so he said, "Hey, look, I'm going to go independent." And you start seeing so many names. Cornel West running for the People's Party. Jill Stein later on came as another option. There was a lot of candidates, but it blows my mind with all these names that want to make their bid. And then it's like, okay, we come back to a repeat. It's just, it really shows the soap opera style, I guess, in politics that people don't really, pay attention at. But I don't know, man. It's unfortunate because obviously a lot of people didn't want to see a repeat, but I don't know, because I feel like on the right, Trump has garnered that fan base where they wanted to see him, take another jab at the race. I mean, Comrade, what do you have to say in a sense of how the turn of events has occurred since from those previous candidates to now?
It only seems to have heightened really quick, and we know the reasons why. We were all in tuned to watching the debates, not feeling like we were getting much out of it. Both in the Democratic side, we were like, it's going to be Biden, so why watch this? When we watched the Republican debates, Trump didn't even show up because he didn't need to, because it seems that solid on both sides. I like Christian's reference of Grover Cleveland, because it seems like we knew 4 years ago that regardless, this was going to happen in 4 years. It almost seemed predetermined to get to this point. It's just the day-to-day type of massive event type stuff. That's something we don't project.
So, but Christian, what's interesting is that I've spoken with a lot of my conservative friends, and so a lot of them wasn't too before like, we really don't want Trump as our guy again. I mean, they in a sense, they did want another option. They kind of got a little tired of Trump because of his mouth. Let's just be honest. His mouth gets him in a lot of trouble. So they wanted somebody to replace him. And then on the left side, Conrad, you mentioned everyone knew it was going to be Biden, but I doubted that even if they wanted Biden. I mean, I'll just be honest. Like,
nope.
I'm not a fan of really anybody. I would love to see the third party kind of build up, but obviously no ballot access, no support, no that money. I mean, it's a waste. It really is a wasted vote. But I don't know. I mean, the left should have had it's another conversation, but the left should have had a primary, in my opinion. I'll just be honest. Biden was there to be the almighty replacement to get Trump out of office. To my knowledge, if I'm not mistaken, I'm pretty sure he said publicly it was going to be kind of a one and done, like a one term, and then on to whoever he would love to, build up. And now that's changed. So now you're looking at a bunch of undecided voters. You see the Democrat kind of going in shambles. I'm kind of rambling off, but let's go to that first debate. Okay, let's go to that first debate. The first debate was asked from President Biden. He challenged former President Trump to a debate because, like we mentioned earlier, Trump did not participate in any Republican primary debates. Didn't need to. I mean, I feel like he knew it probably would have hurt him if he would have went toe to toe with a lot of these candidates, but it was a smart on the strategies side to say no, just let him go to a rally, let him speak, and get the crowd riled up. I mean, he says what they want to hear, so it's all kind of like a publicity tour, build up that fan base, and now okay, it's the first debate. Biden. I'll start off with Christian on this one. Christian, did you check out that first debate?
I watched that travesty happen live. I mean, obviously, I'm biased because on this panel, I'm coming from the right perspective. But I would also like to say that I think I can look at things like that objectively. I mean, I have seen instances where the conservative candidate bombs. Right? It's I've watched plenty of debates in my life, and I've seen the right win, I've seen the right lose, I've seen the left win, I've seen the left lose. I mean, this was anybody who watched this with honest mindset knew that this was just, I don't know how it could have gone any worse for Biden, to be completely honest. I mean, he was barely capable. I don't even know if barely capable actually summarizes this accurately, but he was barely capable of even articulating sentences, let alone refuting or rebutting the claims that Trump was making from time to time, right? And he failed even on pushing back. I don't even think that he made an attempt to do so. Half the time, I mean, there was this one line in the debate where Biden said something and then Trump responded with, "I don't know what he said, and I don't think he knows either." And at that point,
very Trump-like, by the way. That's something Trump would do.
But that's the point. Trump has never lost his ability to do that. Biden clearly has. I don't think Biden, 2020, I'm thinking right now, when he went off the cuff, "Oh, will you shut up, man?" That became a great line for Biden towards his base. He can't do that now.
Yeah, the
debate was just it was a mess, and I think that there was already some talk. You guys know this too. There was already a little bit of talk about Biden's age or his fitness to actually run. I mean, let's be honest, running for president is an exhausting process.
Did Christian just say a little bit of talk? Christian, I think that's been the talk since he's been.
That's why Dean Phillips ran, right? That's why Dean Phillips challenged him. But remember that like Democrats basically shut that down. The DNC went out of their way to try to close down primaries from happening and give the nomination to Biden without a fight, because they thought that, oh, well, history shows that when an incumbent is challenged within their own party, that's usually a bad thing. So let's just not allow that to happen. And Dean's entire point was, from his perspective, he was like, look, I'm a Democrat. There's plenty of things that Biden has done in terms of policy that I support, but we need somebody that can actually physically do the job. And I don't think he can. And he was basically run out of the party, so to speak, for saying that. And then this debate happened. And then it was almost like people woke up almost overnight and was like, yeah, Biden's not running the country. And I feel like I've been misled by, if you're a Democrat, you're probably saying, I feel like I've been misled by my own party, who was telling me there's nothing to see here. And there is obviously something to see here. And I think that that's led to this explosion of discussion over replacing him. But the problem is we're now in July. There's a reason why you should have a primary process.
I second that.
Yeah, and I think that's what's pissed me off with the Democrats, because in a sense, it's disrespecting the voters. It's disrespecting people that are really wanting to hear hear from another voice, for one, and then also give them the option to choose from a man that is 81, 82 years old. And I mean, to add on to Christian, I mean, it was a horrifying sight to see when, I mean, you have two camera angles. When one is talking, the other one is looking like he's waiting for his next scoop of, I don't know, applesauce or something. Like he's just, and I'm like, do they know he is? And I think they said he stayed at Camp David for about a week to prepare for this. I didn't see any preparation or anything. It was not. And then it was a win, I would say, for Trump, just based on the physical appearance. But we have to be honest. They caught him with at least over 50 or 45. I don't remember the actual count. Fact checking, but there wasn't that going on during this debate because it was hosted by CNN. CNN is struggling with ratings right now, so they're trying to really kind of lean more centrist and unbiased, which is they're trying. I'll say that they're trying with the ratings. But it was it was tough. It was tough, but I know that it is very short lived. I mean, it's 4 months, but I mean, Conrad, in a sense, is it too late to choose, to choose another, put somebody?
Anything after the convention will be too late. So you got to throw it together now. I think I read yesterday that they were trying to get him being the DNC nominee even before the convention to somehow make that even more official than it already seems to be. And I don't know what that would do for someone like myself or the great base who feels a little not just scorned for the process, but let down for what still lies ahead to vote for. I always like the phrase vote for as opposed to vote against. There's plenty of dogma about voting against Trump, and there always has been. It's not new from this side, the left side. What is, I guess, new is that this is clearly not a good candidate to do it with.
Do you think the left screwed up by not at least trying to rely more on RFK? I mean, I understand that RFK is a little, is controversial, obviously, with the vaccination stance, and other, certain conspiracy theories you can say, but do you think they kind of shot themselves in the foot by not at least letting him have that chance in somewhat of a primary? Because I honestly think he would have been ahead of Dean Phillips, in all honesty. I think he probably would have been
Probably definitely more than Dean, because he's got his own version of a name recognition. It's people are going to know from whatever they remember from history class, RFK, and then they'll try to see if some sort of magic can spring from that. Of course, I've seen him in his own versions of doing interviews. I'm not necessarily enthused with him. I have my own particular views right now that some of them that he's not agreeing with. So that doesn't mean I would have more enthusiasm with RFK either. So what do I do in this instance? I have to look even beyond those three. And as you mentioned, there are several other candidates, but all that would end up doing probably overall reduce turnout, maybe, but also reduce turnout from what would have been expected the Democrat bloc.
Christian, I want to ask you, being a person from the right, there has been said that honestly, Donald Trump, former President Donald Trump, has changed the party and has continued to change it with new voices, new faces. Obviously, in leadership, we have Matt Gaetz, we have Marjorie Taylor Greene, you have now his running mate, Senator J.D. Vance out of Ohio, junior senator. I'm trying Lauren Burke. Like, there's so many that you have the MAGA movement, and you have the Republican party. You have a lot of you have division, just like any other party has division within their party. But do you see Trump as somewhat changing the future of the Republican Party?
Yeah, when you look at American political history, they say that there's been 6 party systems that have existed since the founding of this country, right? And party systems usually last multiple generations. They, 6 and 250 years, right? I think that we're at the end of the 6th party system. I think we're entering now the 7th party system, and you could argue that process began in 2016. Now, some people could argue potentially it began in 2008, but I actually feel like 2008 was almost like the peak of the Democratic cycle of the 6th party system, whereas something like 1980 or 1984 was kind of the Republican peak of the 6th party system. So both sides kind of had their time to shine, but I think that the political era of Reagan, Bill Clinton, George Bush, and Barack Obama is over. When you look at the coalitions that those 4 men put together and how each of them managed to get into the White House, I don't see those coalitions in place for either the Republican or Democratic Party. If you think about it, the Republican Party of Ronald Reagan and George Bush was largely a suburban, college-educated, wealthy, almost, when I say elitist, I don't mean that in the traditional sense of like, hereditary nobility, but a well-to-do upper middle class coalition of professionals. And when you look at the coalition that Barack Obama put together, Obama's coalition was, they described it as the coalition of the ascendant, right? It was a younger demographic. It was a more diverse demographic. It was a demographic that included all sorts of different diversity within races. It included a lot of women. It also included a lot of professionals. It included a lot of suburbanites that had college degrees. And so Obama began the process of actually in some ways peeling off, and you could also argue Clinton started this actually, of peeling off some of these white college educated suburbanites that used to be the core of the Republican base back in the 80s. And by the time you get to the Obama era, you have this dominant coalition of the ascendant that includes traditional Democratic bases like working class voters, union voters, blue collar voters, but it also includes a diversity of people when it comes to youth, when it comes to racial diversity, when it comes to things like women. And it included some elements of the old Republican coalition, white college-educated suburbanites. And that combination gave Obama a very strong electoral coalition. But now what you've seen with the rise of Trump and what I think is the seventh party system is that Trump has, rather than trying to appeal back to the Reagan coalition, he's just constructed a new one entirely of his own. And he's done so by peeling off elements of what used to be the Obama coalition. Consider the fact that Michigan was not a contested state at all during the Obama era. Obama won it by double digits twice. Michigan very well could end up being the state that decides the presidency now. And likewise, the flip side is consider states that used to be solid Republican states. Virginia, which is a state that's filled with a bunch of white college-educated suburbanites historically, used to be a Republican state into the Reagan era, and now it's a Democratic state. Now, you could argue that it's a moderately Democratic-leaning state, right? We have a Republican governor. Republicans might make a play for this state in the fall, but it has moved to the left since the 80s, whereas Michigan has definitely moved to the right since the 80s. So I think that Trump has built a brand new coalition, and you could argue that it's populist in nature, or you could argue that it's more built around things like economic nationalism. It's more, in some ways, paleo-conservative rather than neoconservative. But yeah, it's just different. It's much different than what we've seen over the last few generations.
You kind of answered part of my next question on like the attraction of Trump, because I honestly am, believe, and it's my little own conspiracy, I don't think Trump ever really wanted to become president. I personally think it was a personality thing, and I think when he realized that he won, he's like, oh damn, okay, quick, let's build up a staff, let's build a group of people. And now that he is, it's like, because at the end of the day, and not trying to down the way voters look towards a candidate, but I mean, it helps that the man was a celebrity prior to being in office. The Celebrity Apprentice, Celebrity Apprentice, he was a socialite out in New York City. He was a star before he was also a Democrat, which is interesting because Trump really is not as conservative as most people think just because he's the Republican, candidate. He really he holds a bit of liberal, but and I think that's where the separation kind of, because he is, he's very unfiltered. He's very unfiltered and not a traditional, conservative the way I would assume like the guys like a McConnell would lean towards. Obviously, that's why he got booed in the RNC convention recently. And it brings the attraction, I guess, of like a guy like J.D. Vance too, and why it somewhat makes a good, combination. Which I don't want to move too far because I do want to ask more on that. But what we're gonna do, fellas, we're gonna take a quick commercial break. When we come back, I want to talk about the recent assassination attempt and what was going on. What was your reaction when you first saw that? So, look, ladies and gents, again, you're tuning to the Arington Gavin Show. I'm here joining my panelists of political experts. I have co-hosts of Making the Argument podcast with Nick Freitas, Mr. Christian Hines, as well as my good friend Mr. Conrad Shesvender, host of Shez Who. We'll be back with more here on the Arington Gavin Show. Don't go anywhere. All righty, ladies and gents, welcome back to the Arington Gavin Show. Look, panelists, I want to bring up the a sad day in our history. Really, because I say this all the time: respect others' opinions. I don't want to wish harm on anybody. I hope that majority of my listeners and viewers tuning into this show can agree with me. But recently at a rally over in Butler, Pennsylvania, former President Donald Trump was speaking, and it was an assassination attempt. He was shot. Actually, it skimmed his ear. What's the word I'm looking for? It is grazed. There we go. Grazed his ear, and you see him go down. You see his security detail come right on top of him, and obviously you see the blood rolling down. Which I will just say this. Well, let me ask you guys, what was the first reaction when you first heard about this? Conrad, I'll start with you, man.
Right around 6 o'clock, I arrived in Virginia Beach to play a game of cards, and that was going to be something that happened the rest of the night. Mm-hmm. So first thing I did, I always scroll Facebook. I always have my phone with me, and then I see Paris Barnes, who I believe used to be a Fox contributor, say, "Please play for President Trump," and it had just happened. It was all caps. I had no idea what was going on, so I went to Google Donald Trump news. I hadn't seen anything yet. So another 5 to 10 minutes needed to go by. And then I started to see, was involved in shooting. So I spent the rest of the night looking at my phone with 20 to 30 other people who are progressively talking about it through the rest of the night about how this changes things. And I watched a little bit of Making the Argument today because they did a live show. And Christian will have a good point to talk about some of the headlines regarding how it was happening in the moment. But in that moment, I felt like a change within me in the sense that I felt like everything is now different to the point that I feel less enthused than even I was, because I now foresee it is pretty much a lock. Donald Trump wins the presidency.
Christian, what about you?
It's interesting. I had a friend that messaged me actually on Discord and was like, "Oh, I was watching some, YouTube live stream and my favorite person mentioned it." And so that was funny that indirectly that's how I learned about it. But I heard about it probably within like 10 minutes of it actually happening. And then I jumped on Twitter and, everything was just, it was like Twitter normally is. There's a million different photos, a million different videos. Everybody has an opinion. And it's at the moment, I didn't understand how serious it was until I saw the video the first time, right? I heard, people talk about committing terrible things all the time, but how close do they actually get to pulling it off, right? Like, is this on the same scale as when that guy hurled that shoe at George Bush in 2008, or is this something more serious? And then I saw the video and I'm like, oh, it was something much more serious, especially because it unfortunately did kill somebody in the audience that went to attend Trump's rally, which is and it injured 2 other people as well. So there were 3 casualties of totally innocent people, 4 if you include the former president. And that was in some ways, we did a podcast where we talked about this, and somebody asked us on our show and said, like, what's the likelihood that something like this will take place? And I remember back in like January being like, oh, it might happen, but it's very rare. And then as things progressed, I felt like that I was being disproven more and more until finally we got to this point. And in some ways, it's kind of like a wake up call for where we are at the moment. Obviously, people are still investigating the details. I know that there's information that suggests this person's on the left or the right, and there's conflicting information about the motives behind this person. And let's be honest, if you're willing to get yourself taken out to try to take out a political figure, you're also probably struggling with some form of, exactly. So even outside of the motives, though, the fact that we've gotten to this point is really telling. I feel like politics today is very different than it was a decade ago, potentially even more different than it was, 8 years ago. So yeah, it was just it's one of those days that I think everybody will remember where they were when it happened.
Yeah, it was again. I mean, it just made me extreme. Like it just made me sad. And you're speaking to a huge critic of Trump. I mean, I criticize him a lot on this program. I'm not a fan, but I don't wish that on anybody. I don't wish it on my own enemies. I really don't. And the fact that this occurred, and what really irritated me was the fact that there was people that were either making jokes about it, saying it was staged, saying it was. I mean, there's and it's still going on to this day. And I mean, I literally just read an article earlier today. The group Tenacious D, Kyle Gass, he had made a comment about the shooting, and I mean, obviously he's now canceled. He's probably going to be in the same boat as is it Kathy Griffin? He had the I mean, literally,
she held up Trump's head.
Like why is this? No, not even funny. No, why would you even try to say this? So, again, it was a lot that was going on in my head. But honestly, the first thing, and to go back to what Conrad has said, I'm like, this just made him that's the victory right there. Especially when you see President Trump, they grab him up, he tells them to stop. There's a photo of him, blood streaming down his face, fist in the air, and the flag waving by. You can't ask. I mean, that's so.
It's one of the most photos I've ever seen.
Totally agree, Christian. One of the most iconic, and right then and there, I'm like, okay, Democrats, you're probably peeing your pants at this point because
I was watching some YouTube shows the next day because I want to try to get more information, and I watched something that played live the previous day. The show, I believe, is called Heartlands Media, and they had interviewed a guy who had said that is the most iconic image since the explosion from the second tower when the plane hit.
Whoa! Wow! I can't disagree.
I mean that's the type of photo that will end up being in our children's, like our grandchildren's history textbooks in 50 or 70 years, right? Like, after we're gone, future generations will see this photo, and it'll be in a paragraph talking about the chaotic political era of the 2020s, right? The 1920s were if you open up a history book and you look at 1920s political history, you probably would see a picture of Calvin Coolidge or Herbert Hoover, right? Maybe the Wall Street crash. 100 years later, the picture that you'll see is that will be the photo, if not, one of many that describes this era. And in some ways, it really encapsulates this change that I was talking about earlier about how we're entering a new era of American politics, the seventh party system, because the coalitions are different. And the nature of the debate is also different, for some ways for better, but in other ways for much worse, because historically and I think Conrad actually might agree with parts of this. Historically, we used to have a shared foundation of like what the United States was supposed to stand for. If you're a fan of the movie Gladiator, there's a line in there where the guy that's playing Marcus Aurelius says, "There once was a dream that was Rome." There once was a dream that was Rome, and everybody pushes this. Well, in the same sense, there once was an American dream. There once was something that, regardless of what your background was or what your status was within the country, there was a shared sense of principles and beliefs that we all kind of just believed in by virtue of being Americans. And so our political debates were usually about policy, right? They were about what should our top tax rate be? How do we fix, the highways? How do we deal with education policy or healthcare? How do we deal with trade policy? And at the end of the day, we were debating policies because we were trying to make a more perfect union. But now what's happened, and it's been a gradual process, and it certainly has not been one side or the other that's been uniquely pushing this. It's been almost a universal totalizing thing. But what's happened is that our politics has now become replaced with almost a friend-enemy distinction, which is catastrophic, actually, when something like that takes hold within a country. History is filled with no shortage of lessons of what happens when a country adopts a friend-to-enemy interpretation of politics rather than a policy-oriented interpretation of politics. And in some ways, it's terrifying that we're entering that era, right? And you could point potentially to the assassination. You could point to some of the violence that you saw in the 2020 election cycle on both sides. You can point to the Summer of Love in 2020, where you had anarchy in a lot of cities like Portland and Seattle. You had like Chaz, and then you had obviously the January 6th events at the end of that election cycle. And so in some ways there were signs that we were entering into this chaotic era, and I don't think we're done with it yet, to be honest. So
you know what, you bring up a great point, Christian, because it goes to like after this had happened as well. Obviously, I shared my frustration, coming from the left side, that they were, obviously making the joke saying it was staged. Then people on the right were saying, see, because of Joe Biden stages. I'm trying to remember which senator, or might have been a congressman, that actually said it. He was the first one too, but he said, yeah, this was staged. This was orders from President Biden, or the fact that he said he used the word bullseye, and it's like, see what it triggered. But to me, I'm like, okay, don't be, now we're sounding like hypocrites, because let's be honest, you're telling me that Trump's verbiage has never been controversial. I'm just saying that can trigger a lot of people. I mean, we can. It's another conversation, but the whole January 6th thing, I'm just saying, like, this whole back and forth, it's very irritating. That's why, for people like me in the middle, I get tired of the two-party system, right? I get tired of seeing the whole on both sides, promises being made, never met. Or just, grown men talking about who has the better golf game or who can win in push-up contests. Like, this is really what I'm, risking my time and efforts to vote for that can help take care of my living situation. Like, it's unfortunate, but like you mentioned, Christian, is it gonna end anytime soon? I don't know. I mean, I'm hoping that this was somewhat of a wake-up call for both candidates. I know President Biden had said a message about, hey, cool it down with the divisiveness happening on the political field. Hey, we can agree to disagree. I'm hoping the same goes for President Trump after literally, if that was centimeters shy from his ear, I mean, we could have been talking on a different story. So I'm just hoping that there will be some changes soon. But as Conrad, I mean, what do you think the left should be doing now? Right? Okay, obviously Trump is looked upon as a survivor. Well, he's a survivor of an assassination attempt. The RNC is going on as we speak right now. By the time this episode goes out, it'll probably be close to ending. But the RNC is a packed house. You got there's a lot of diversity hitting the stage, but I will say I didn't see a lot of diversity in the crowd. But they had, their message was unity at one point. They're trying to bring more diverse, especially in the Black community. Their numbers of Black male voters are growing as far as leaning towards Trump. He had Amber Rose speaking at the RNC, which I thought was interesting. And you have guys like 50 Cent, Waka Flocka. You have some figures in the hip hop community as well, speaking on their support of Trump. Where's the left at now? Like, what do they do? At first, we were talking about, the last time, okay, Biden should drop out. Now that kind of settled down after, hearing about the, the assassination attempt. We just said with that iconic pose that President Trump did. That's it right there. He's the winner. He will be the next president of the United States. What do you think the left should be doing at this point?
Well, I don't want them to lose interest.
Okay.
I do want them to still vote. I don't necessarily want them to, as a group, vote for Biden. I project that they will, because this is the Democrat candidate. I think we saw this as a good example in 2016, because back then I was still very libertarian myself. So I'm like getting ready to really enjoy voting for Gary Johnson. Mm-hmm. In October, I'm like, he was nearing 10%. He did not have 10% on election day. And even with the weirdness of having Trump and Clinton, both parties sort of coalesced to who they were. In many ways, I still expect that to happen, but I don't want that to be the lesson that is how it should happen, because I think what could happen is if a lot of people publicly say they're still going to come out and vote and advocate for X, Y, and Z, it's just not going to come with a Biden vote on the ballot box. Perhaps they stay in to vote down the ballot and for initiatives that are on their respective states' ballots, that it might send itself a message that we have to shape up. And that's one thing that I would say, as someone who now leans left, that we got to do better than what we have, because if you keep saying vote blue no matter who, you will get the example of the no matter who. It is itself a version of self-corruption. And I don't want to be self-corrupted. Not that I would lean away from Christian be able to say his story, because I've moved around politically all over the place. I know that he wasn't where he is now, back as far as 2016. He can mention his own travels. I say I might still travel down the line, but right now I would project there is a message we could send that even with Trump being as bad as we believe him to be, we still got to present a better face.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Christian, I want to talk about these. There's not a lot of cases for former President Donald Trump. The case on the documents that was dismissed. Again, a lot of good stuff has happened. A lot of good stuff has happened after this assassination attempt. I don't know if Trump is in his mind saying, if this was a little bit. No, I'm joking. But like he's gained, I think, 2 endorsements by 2 billionaires. One of them being Elon Musk, who has said publicly he will donate $45 million a month, which I'm gonna say that again, just for the people in the back who didn't hear. $45 million a month, not $45, not $45,000, not $4,500, $45 million a month to a Trump super PAC. And then there was another billionaire. Bill. Oh gosh,
Bill Ackman. Bill Ackman.
There we go. Thank you so much, Christian. So, he gained that publicly, after that, as well as, charges being dropped. So it's like at this point, what else can we expect, with Trump, and really with just the cases, what are you hearing, Christian, or has spoken with some of your friends, on the right, their mindsets with the cases filed against Trump? Are they looking at all of them as like, oh, this is this the left, political driven stuff right here. This is now the court system being a political tool on both sides, but especially for Trump because they just don't like him. Like, what has been some of the conversations, if you don't mind sharing?
Well, the polling shows something interesting, which is that the American public, depending on the case, right? There's many different out there, but depending on the case, the American public will say something like, yeah, Trump has a propensity to put his foot in his mouth, but 2 things can be true at once where, yeah, he has a propensity to put his foot in his mouth. And there's political motivations behind certainly some, if not all of these cases that are being brought against him. Bill Maher actually a couple weeks ago had Andrew Cuomo, the former governor of New York, on his show. And Cuomo actually, of all people, brought up, polling shows that Trump is competitive in New York. Nobody thinks he's going to win it. He's almost certainly not going to win it unless he pulls off a Reagan-style landslide. But he might come a lot closer than what previous Republican candidates have come before. And Cuomo's point is that part of the reason he might come closer in a state like New York and that he might end up winning the presidency in general is because there's a chunk of Americans out there that feel like that he is being politically targeted. And obviously the right very much feels like that he's being politically targeted. They from the right's perspective, they think that this is election interference in the sense that we as a party chose this man to be our nominee. He is going to be our nominee. He'll be nominated, in the coming days in the RNC convention in Milwaukee. And by charging him with these things and potentially threatening him with jail time or the inability for him to campaign if he's sentenced to house arrest, potentially, what could happen is that this could impact the outcome of the election. And that's in some ways uncharted waters. Again, I've said this before. Now, the counterpoint from the left is, well, so you're saying that there's no way that we can ever hold a president accountable, is what their counterpoint is. And then the right would probably, depending on the person, right? The right would probably come back and say, no, there is a way that you can actually hold somebody accountable, and it's called at the ballot box. It's called let the American public decide who our next president should be, rather than using the legal system in order to make it more difficult for one candidate to get into the White House versus the other candidate. These are difficult questions to answer. I know that there's strong arguments to be made on all sides. But speaking as somebody on the right, I totally understand why Republicans or why conservatives or why people on the right in general are upset about this right now. I also think, though, that there's some points that people on the left have made about how this has really energized the right, and it hasn't necessarily energized the left. And so in some ways, from their perspective, and I think that people like Cuomo are correct on this, that these cases are actually backfiring on Democrats to some degree. And again, I think that many things can be true at once. I think that you can say that Trump, again, has made many mistakes in the past, and that there's political motivations behind some of these things, and that it is energizing Republicans, and that it's in some ways backfiring against Democrats. So that's where I'm coming from, and I think that that's where a lot of people on the right are coming from. But obviously, I understand that there's a wide array of takes on this issue. It's a very controversial topic.
Yeah, she got you. Conrad, did you want to add anything to that? I saw you shaking your head a couple times.
There's also a combination of me trying to direct some cats around here and muting to make sure that their meows aren't picked up. But I would, in many ways, second in my own way, trying to be objective here, that it could be seen as like a consistent version of a political crusade against Trump to use the legal system as the means to bring him down. Mm-hmm. And that would be a great way for the right to have even more reason to dislike Biden and the state that Biden represents, because it is now aimed at Trump in a political fashion. Yeah, I would second Christian's opinion that, well, how are we ever going to hold a hypothetical president accountable if they actually do something? And we could try to say these four trials were versions of things. We can both point to history that it was very likely that the impeachment method would have successfully worked on, say, Nixon prior to him resigning. Maybe if Harding didn't die in office, T-Bob Dome would have brought him down. Andrew Johnson was. And I'm like, is that something that could have happened for Trump? He had two impeachments that weren't successful. In the sense that the House did impeach him, but the Senate did not. Is that the only version of accountability that we should hold from the legislative and judicial branches toward the executive branch? Yeah, we're all up in arms about Project 2025 now and how that may re-envision the executive branch. I'm just worried about that. Doesn't mean that the legislative branch shouldn't try to do something if they believe the president in time has done something. That way they got to bring the impeachments.
Yeah. Yeah, well, what kills me is the fact that they act like when there's cases being brought, especially, well, I'll just say in Trump's case, they look at it as just like, oh, this is foreign. This never happens to a sitting president or really anybody in a high political position. But it's like, if you can't recall, the governor out of Illinois, Rod Blagojevich, I mean, he was a Democrat. He was held accountable, right? Bob Menendez, yes. I mean, out of New Jersey, and found guilty as well. So to say this is a political driven, to me, was just like, wait a minute. But if you go back, they've held their standards on the left as well. Maybe not as much as one side. I don't know, but it's interesting. It really is interesting, guys. We're coming up almost on a few minutes left within the program, and I want to get your take on real quick. Conrad, I'll start with you first. What, as far as this presidential election, what is at stake for the Democrats that the right can never match up for, that the right is obviously losing in trying to say, okay, this is what we can do in order to take care of that. If we can garner your vote, this is what we can do. What is it? What's at stake? Can you say that's coming from the left?
If I could, I would ask you to try to phrase that again.
There's a lot of key things that are at stake with this election. So one is hurting the Republicans. The Republicans cannot find an answer to match up with that. Likewise for the Democrats. So as far as on the Democrat standpoint, what is high, for the left that is hurting the right, that the right cannot, say, ooh, we have an answer for that. Oh, we actually don't. What is hurting them? in
Max,
this
we're
race.
trying to think, what is it that might be considered like a strong suit of ours right now?
The women's reproductive, right? I feel like that's something that's really, you know, the right is not finding a way to, you know, gain the trust when it comes to women's reproductive
I would
rights.
agree.
Mhm.
I don't know how much right now that is even more of still a favor due to the recent events. But yeah, that has seemed to be the strong quiver, to use a old term in our in our quiver right now. But for instance, right now I went to my phone to look at a picture I saved of what Biden says his 100 days of the next term he will do. Restore Rose at the top. And as if he hasn't been president since the time that it was turned down. Expand Social Security and Medicare. Again, he's currently the president. Why isn't that currently happening? End all medical debt, raise the minimum wage, end union busting, ban assault weapons. He's been really rallying against assault weapons since he's been in office, and it has gone nowhere. Made the child tax cut permanent, which was something that he had for about a year and a half of his term. Then it expired. He wants to blame Republicans. But again, it's not being proposed to even expand again right now. This is his suggestion of, hey, vote for me because this is what I'm going to do in my first 100 days, as if he's not currently the president. And we only have 111 more to go. We can do that now. So does that give the left great reason to want to vote for Biden, who to us we see as someone who's ineffective on those aims, other than the simple premise, vote against Trump? And right now that's no longer strong enough.
Yeah. Christian, what about you, man? What is a key issue coming from the right that is simply like, hey, the left does not have an answer for?
So if you, I'm going to close the loop here, talking about the first thing we brought up today. If you remember the debate, I think the average person who watched that debate concluded out of that debate, Joe Biden is not running this country. And then the follow-up immediate question that most people would be asking is, so who is? And if you know that Joe Biden, because again, anybody who watched that debate knows Joe Biden is not running the day-to-day operations of the federal government. Who's really running the federal government right now is the bureaucracy. It's the administrative state. It's the managerial class. And I think that Republicans are really starting to lean into the idea that is the main opposition that they have. It's not actually Joe Biden. Joe Biden in some ways is a figurehead. He's a name on a ballot, but he's not really running the show. It's the bureaucracy that's running the show. And that in some ways has converted former libertarians such as myself into becoming more in line with the Trump-Vance ticket, because I think they're calling out from their perspective what the real fight is. The fight is not against whoever the Democratic nominee is. The fight is against the administrative state. It's against the bureaucracy. It's against the nameless, faceless blob that, you know, has the efficiency of the DMV and the compassion of the IRS. And that is the thing that I think Republicans are realizing, that you shift the needle by going after that and flipping that, because part of the reason that Trump was not able to get a lot of what he wanted done the first time was because at the end of the day, if you don't have the support of the bureaucracy, they can wait you out, because presidents come and go, Congresses come and go, but the bureaucracy is eternal. There's no term limits for people that work in bureaucratic positions. And if a president wants to implement a policy, but the unelected bureaucracy is preventing he or she from actually executing the policy that they were elected to implement, we'll get into questions of, do we even live in a constitutional republic anymore? Because who has the real power in this country? It should be vested in the elected officials in our Congress, in our presidency, not in this fourth branch of government that doesn't even exist within the Constitution. So I think that's in some ways the subtle, it's becoming more prominent, but I think that's the direction that we're moving in right now on the right, is like the big fight coming up.
Well, you know what, fellas, we definitely have to have a part 2, because we have like seconds left before this is over. But look, you guys don't go anywhere. Again, Mr. Christian Hines, Conrad Shesventer, look, we're going to have a part 2, guys. So again, don't go anywhere. But my friends who are listening as we speak right now, continue to tune into the Arington Gavin Show. I truly appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Look, I'm out. I'll see you next time.